Your brain only has so many resources to use during the day. And if those resources are being taken up by things like stress and comparing yourself to others and worrying about doing things the right way, all of that is zapping those resources, and that's taking a toll on your mind and your body.
Ever feel like you suck at this job? Motherhood, I mean. Have too much anxiety and not enough patience? Too much yelling, not enough play? There's no manual, no village, no guarantees. The stakes are high. We want so badly to get it right. But this is survival mode. We're just trying to make it to bedtime. So if you're full of mom guilt, your temper scares you, you feel like you're screwing everything up, and you're afraid to admit any of those things out loud, this podcast is for you. This is Failing Motherhood. I'm Danielle Bettman, and each week we'll chat with a mom ready to be real, sharing her insecurities, her fears, her failures, and her wins. We do not have it all figured out. That's not the goal. The goal is to remind you, you are the mom your kids need. They need what you have, you are good enough, and you're not alone. I hope you pop in earbuds, somehow sneak away, and get ready to hear some hope from the trenches. You belong here, friend. We're so glad you're here. Hey friends, it's Danielle. Welcome back to Failing Motherhood. I can't wait for you to hear this conversation with Dr. Nicole Byers. She is a psychologist who specializes in brain health, and she has opened up her own practice specifically to help moms overcome the limiting beliefs and the things that really get in the way of us having brain fog and remembering to do things and just feeling a lot less overwhelmed, burnt out, and like we just can't even. And there's so many good nuggets in this episode. She talks about how to harness the ways that you're thinking and questions to ask yourself to turn that around and reframe a lot of the ways that we are seeing things. She talks a lot about the mind-body connection and how to untrain the habits of how her brain has learned to see things and to cope. And we talk about being an expert worrier. We talk about the idea of burnout being so correlated with our limiting resources, multitasking, all of the things. Really, really, really valuable insight that I know you can't wait to dive into. So right before I let you jump into our conversation, I wanted to let you know that if you are a parent of kids age 1 to 7, and you have any goals that are at all related to extending your patience, preventing tantrums, and eliminating power struggles, then I have a free masterclass for you. So if you're listening to this the first week this episode is live, it will be Sunday, September 7th at 4 p.m. Central. And it's completely free and live. This is the first time I've ever done this. This is brand new. So whenever you're listening to this, if you still have time, save your seat at the link that's in my show notes or on my Instagram bio. In this free training, you will learn how to hold kind yet firm boundaries with your strong-willed child without crushing their spirit. You will learn how to swap timeouts and tantrums for truly connecting, meeting their core needs, and maximizing your influence. Learn how to establish rhythms, routines, and a healthy culture so there's less fighting and more teamwork. Learn how to stop arguing about discipline and start feeling like a team by building a full toolkit of strategies that work. Take control of your composure and rewrite the mindsets that undercut your patience. And avoid needing to save for therapy years down the road because you were the patient, loving, and calm parent that your kiddos needed you to be. So again, right now, if you still have time, go save your spot at parentingwholeheartedly.com/calm, and I cannot wait to see you there. I'm so excited. Okay, here's the episode. Welcome to Failing Motherhood. My name is Danielle Bettman, and on today's episode, I'm joined by Dr. Nicole Byers. Dr. Nicole is a neuropsychologist, host of the Bold Life podcast, online educator, and chocolate enthusiast. Her Her passion is helping women overcome the mental barriers that leave them stuck in self-doubt so they can stop worrying about what everyone else is thinking, build the confidence to speak up, and have the courage to go after their goals. She has a PhD in clinical psychology from the University of Saskatchewan. She's an adjunct research assistant professor at the University of Calgary, and she has published articles in professional journals in the areas of brain health. Welcome, Nicole. I'm so excited to have you today.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Now, that is quite a rap sheet. So as a neuropsychologist, does that automatically make you the world's best mom?
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, I feel like I was saying this the other day, I think it's almost worse when I know what I'm doing is probably not the best option, but I still feel like I need to do it anyway.
Yes. Oh, that's interesting. Because I think you probably, if you just showed, some fancy pictures on Instagram, people would be led to make some assumptions. But it's good to know that you struggle too. Have you ever felt like you were failing motherhood?
Yeah, almost every day. Right? I'm glad I'm not alone. There's a whole community.
Alone.
Yeah.
Yes. Welcome to the club.
Yeah. Thanks.
You're one of us. No, I can't wait to talk more about your work and some of the research that you've done and some of the practical strategies and just probably grace that you can give us. But I want to hear more of your story first. So you have a 3-year-old daughter, right?
I do. Yes. Her name is Allison. She's in the, I don't know what you call the threes, terrible twos, whatever threes comes next, but they're a challenge as well. Three. Yes. Ooh, I like that word. That is exactly what she is right now. So lots of fun. She has lots of opinions about everything.
Love it.
Yeah.
So what is your backstory? Who were you before becoming a mom?
Yeah, great question. So I obviously spent a lot of time in school, many years in university. I've always been really dedicated. I didn't always know what I wanted to do, but I knew education was really important, and it was important for me to have my own career. And for many years, I wasn't even sure if, family and kids was something that I wanted. And then, life changes and priorities change, and I met my husband and we started talking about, starting our own family. And then, we were fortunate and had my daughter. And something that's interesting, so I'm in Canada, so things work a little bit different here in terms of maternity leave and family structures, and it's not the same everywhere in the world, I know, but in Canada, we're allowed to take up to 18 months of maternity leave. We get paid. I know, it is fantastic. It's amazing. And that was kind of where I first realized I was going to have some maybe more unique struggles with motherhood, is I actually went back to work 6 months after my daughter was born, which for us here is really early. And I know that's not early in the US and things are very different, but all my friends, all my family was like, oh my gosh, like, why didn't you take the 1.5 years? Like, you have all this time. But I was always like, I loved my job. I always knew I wanted to go back. And so it was a bit of a struggle where, I was back at work pretty early, given, where I live and everyone around me, and trying to balance, growing my business and having a young family. And, my husband actually has stayed home since my daughter was 6 months old. So that's a bit of a different family dynamic than most people I know have, right? Where he's a stay-at-home dad and I'm our primary income earner for our family.
Yeah, that is a big shift. Was that hard for you to kind of own? Do you have like extra self-doubt with that?
I did. Yeah. And I probably as a mom, moms can relate to this, is it's so easy to doubt yourself in so many areas. And I felt like I wasn't, doing enough at work and contributing enough there because my, mind was being split. And I had this young baby who wasn't sleeping at all for the first 9 or 10 months of her life and trying to work full time. But then you're home and you feel like you can't give 100% there because your mind's at work and, really trying to juggle that mental load.
Yeah. How much were you working at that point? How many hours, like a week?
So initially when I went back to work, I was working in a hospital position. So it was a 40-hour work week, pretty set schedule. And then I had this brilliant idea when my daughter was maybe 1.5 years old that maybe we should start our own business and I should go into private practice and leave this cushy hospital setting with the benefits and the full-time hours. And, the last couple of years or so, I've been building my business more. I've been working, 50, 60 hours a week, which is a lot. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I know it seems like you have so much more freedom as an entrepreneur, but at the same time, it's so much more work.
Yes. And I thought that was going to be the thing, right? Like I'd have all this extra time and this freedom in my schedule. So like when she has an activity, I could take time off to do it. And then I realized I'm just actually working more than I used to. I'm happy. I love my business, but it's definitely been a shift.
Yes. You have to be all in for it to be worth it.
Yes. Yes.
Well, congrats on starting your private practice. That's a big deal. Mm-hmm. So have you dealt with any other mom guilt then?
Yeah. One thing I struggle with a lot is because I'm working so much, I say I almost like, in quotes, feel like a dad a lot of the time. Like my husband and my daughter, they have their schedule, right? So when they're home, they have their routine. And then I come home and I mess everything up, right? Like their routine's off and I'm getting in the way. And it's like, I don't feel trying to find my spot there. Or like the other day I had a Monday morning off and I was so excited because I could take her to her gymnastics class. And then like we get there and we're done and she's like, Mommy, where's my snack? And I'm like, oh, like I didn't know I was supposed to bring a snack. And she's like, well, Daddy always brings me snacks. And I was like, oh, great, right? Bring on the mom guilt of like, Mom forgot to bring snacks. And like, Dad obviously has all of this under control. And like, my daughter thinks it's hilarious to bring up all the things that I do that sound like dad things, right? Like forgetting about this and forgetting about that. And I don't know the routine at preschool because I don't usually do drop off or pick up. And hoy, guilt.
Yeah. Motherhood gives you enough reasons to feel like you're doing it wrong, let alone having your daughter just like writing them all down in a long list for you.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's so hard. So was that something that you have to like coach yourself on with how much you know about things? Like, do you have like a heart versus the head type of struggle internally? Like, what is your relationship with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a little bit of both, right? It's trying to keep in mind in those instances of, this is normal to feel this way, giving myself that little bit of grace, like you mentioned, of not beating myself up when I make those mistakes and knowing that this is all the things that I'm doing with my business and my life and my career. Also, part of the reason that I am so passionate about that is because I want to show my daughter a different way of doing things. And it's important for me to show her those different ways that families can look and that, Mom can have a career and be passionate about her business and her interests, but doesn't mean she loves you any less. They're less committed to the family. And, Dad might be the only dad at gymnastics in a field of moms, and that's okay too, right? And it's okay to have those different experiences.
That's so beautiful because she really will believe that because she's seen that her whole life and you're leading that by your example. And there's no better way to teach her that lesson other than living it day in and day out. So that's huge. That's a really important thing to keep at the top of your head is that reminder of like, this is my why. This is why I'm doing this and this is why it matters. That helps a lot.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What else have you felt like helps? Kind of reframe that mindset.
Yeah. And so, trying to keep in mind kind of from my background too, that all of these things are important for her development as well. So, something I sometimes feel guilty about is not being around enough when I'm home or that I'm not with her 100% of my day all the time. And that's something we're working on as a family because when I'm home, I feel like I need to be 100% committed to her like 24 hours a day, which is not, one, it's not realistic that things happen, right? We have stuff that we need to do, but also that's not great for her either. And it's important for her to have that schedule and to learn that routine and to learn that she can do some things on her own and mommy's, there to support her, but doesn't need to be tied to her at the hip all the time. Yeah, so just keeping in mind, some of this is normal development, some of this is normal for the brain, and it's normal for her to be learning these things too, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's easier. It just means that I know that when she's crying, when I leave her at daycare, that's normal for her to feel that way, and it's still going to be okay.
Yes, it's normal for you. It's normal for her. Yes, you're going to be okay. As you dry your tears. Yeah.
Right.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be fine. So I'd love to hear more about your work and kind of what you do with clients and what has really impacted your motherhood from that.
Yeah. So my background is in neuropsychology, like you mentioned, which is basically I'm a psychologist who specializes in brain health. So how I got started in this area was, like I said, working in a hospital setting with individuals who have had illnesses or injuries that might have impacted their brain health, their thinking skills, things like memory, concentration, problem solving, working with these individuals and their family members. And, that's kind of the primary thing that got me interested in this area. And then in doing that work, I also started to come across more and more people, especially women and especially moms, who were really struggling with, they'd come in and they say, my memory is awful. I can't concentrate. I can't do these things. And, when we talked to them a little bit, what came out is all of those stresses and pressures that are making it hard for their brains to be efficient. So nothing is wrong with their brain. They're healthy, women, but their mind is so full with all these doubts, all of these insecurities, all of the shoulds, what I should be doing and trying to take care of everyone else, and not really leaving enough space for them and for their needs. And so I've been transitioning a little bit over the last few years into working more with individuals in that area on, how to recognize those negative thinking patterns, how to recognize those limiting beliefs that hold us back, leave us feeling burnt out, not able to concentrate, not at our best, both in our family and in our work life.
So needed. Yes. That is almost the overwhelming majority of us, it feels like these days, are struggling in one area or another. And also feeling like we're alone in that, which is not helpful either. So that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast, was to have that conversation about no, actually, it's normal and it's expected that you feel like you're failing. And that's actually part of the journey, and we can find good in that. But it's not good for you to feel like you're failing and to beat yourself up for it and feel like the only one, because then you aren't going to seek out the resources or find the support you need and be able to create the change that's needed for you to be the mom your kids need. So I think that this is a really important conversation, just to get normalized and take away any stigma of shame related to that, but then also know that there are effective solutions out there. So what does that look like?
Yeah, great question. And so, when you're talking there, I was thinking one of the things that also really helped me in my kind of early journey in motherhood was that I had a close friend who had a baby at the same time as me. And it was actually her second, which I think made it even more helpful, because I would tell her things and I'd be like, here's what I'm struggling with. And we would have these play dates and she'd be like, oh yeah, that's me too. Totally. I do that as well. And I'd be like, well, does it get easier with the second one? And she'd be like, think. And she'd be like, no, but at least I know what to expect. And I know that that's normal. And I think that's, so often the benefit of having these communities like yours, where we can talk about those struggles and make it more open. Because I know one thing, especially as moms, we're really bad for this, is we feel like we need to do everything ourselves and that we're the only ones struggling and everyone else seems to have it all together, right? They seem to know what they're doing. How come everyone else can figure this out? I can't figure out what's going on. It must be something wrong with me. I can't ask for help. So I just struggle and I struggle and I struggle. And what I was, really finding in my work, just coming at it from a healthcare perspective, is that constant internal stress and that internal struggle and holding all those things in can really have a negative impact on our health. And so often we forget how connected our minds and our bodies are. And when we're under that constant stress, under that constant pressure, we get to that point of burnout where our bodies really say, enough is enough. I can't handle this anymore. And we're fatigued. Like I said, we're having trouble concentrating. We're forgetful. I put my daughter in the bath one day with her socks on still. It's another one she likes to bring up that mommy did years ago now. Let's just say this, but she still brings it up, right? Where our brains aren't at our max efficiency when we're struggling with all these doubts. And even if they're not on the front of our mind, it's not something we're thinking about all the time. Your brain's still working in the background with all of that comparison, feeling like I should be doing better and all of that doubt that makes it hard to function.
Yeah, I know we can all relate to that. I'm sure you've done that, if not worse, of something that's forgetful. But it does feel like, why can't I figure this out? Why can't I get it together? Why am I so tired all the time? This shouldn't be that hard if, it's just me, right? We really internalize that, and that just isn't true. right?
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. Yeah. And one thing I like to talk to folks about is this idea of, I don't know if it's really called this, but I call it this decision fatigue. And the idea is that we only have so many decisions that we can make every day. Our brain has limited resources, right? And so if your brain is struggling with, thinking about what's this person doing and how come I'm not doing it as well as them, and trying to make all these different decisions and trying to deal with all these stressors day to day, it's really zapping those brain resources. And so, you're finding then that by the end of the day, you're even more burnt out, and things like you said that I feel like I should be able to do, like remember not to put my daughter in the bathtub with her socks on, your brain just forgets because it's running low on resources. And, like I said, moms and especially, but I'm sure others do this too, are so hard on ourselves and trying to always push and push past what we really can do. And we're giving so much, but we're not leaving a lot left for ourselves. And keeping that in mind that, your brain only has so many resources to use during the day. And if those resources are being taken up by things like stress and comparing yourself to others and worrying about doing things the right way, all of that is zapping those resources, and that's taking a toll on your mind and your body.
Right. So is there any hope?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So just as, we can get into these negative patterns of thinking and these negative kind of mental habits, we can untrain these habits as well. Really, when we're thinking about beliefs and limiting beliefs and ways of doing things that hold us back, we've gotten into this pattern for a reason. Usually it's a combination of what we learned growing up, what we see in the world, the messages we got from our family about what it means to be a mom or to be a woman, the messages we get from society about what that means, but also practice, right? The more that my brain spends time worrying, our brains are super great at learning, which is fantastic, but sometimes that can work against us, right? So if my brain
you become an expert at worrying.
Yes, that's exactly it. You become an expert worrier. And then your brain, that's kind of like a mental default that it goes to, is in every situation, then my brain says, okay, what I do to cope with the situation is I worry. And that's what gets us through the situation. But really that worry is burning resources. It's not actually solving the problem. And more often than not, all those horrible worst case scenarios, those bad things that your brain comes up with, aren't accurate. It's not the reality of what's going to happen, but our brains have great imaginations and are really good at taking us down that negative loop that can really burn us out.
Yeah. Yeah. So helpful.
Right? Yeah. Again, our brains are amazing, but they can really get in our way so many times. And so just as we learn these patterns, we learn this self-doubt, we learn to be self-critical, we learn to be hard on ourselves, we unlearn that behavior in the same way. And really what it comes down to is practice. So catching myself when I'm going into that doubt spiral and being able to say, okay, I need to take a moment. I need to step back from what I'm doing right now. Even something as simple as taking a few deep breaths, giving your body and your mind that chance to calm down so that spiral that we're getting into, that endless loop of doubt, stops. Okay, how do I think about this problem again? Because when our brains get into that really amped up, that really stressed state, it's really hard for us to problem solve. It's hard for us to think through solutions. And then what happens is your brain goes, oh my gosh, I can't figure this out. This is getting awful. And then that loop gets worse and worse and worse, right?
Yes. Been there.
Yes. We all have. Yeah.
So it's that easy. Just a couple deep breaths.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. Yeah. Is it really that easy? And so simple, but not easy is maybe the way to phrase it, is that, the best way for us to initially interrupt these negative patterns, these mental habits that we're getting into, is calming our body down. So again, our bodies and our minds are really connected. So when my brain is going into that, oh my gosh, end of the world, things are spiraling out of control, I'm so stressed, I'm so overwhelmed, your body feels that, right? And we've all been there before. We start to feel tense, we start to feel stressed, our stomach's doing some backflips and it's bothering us. Maybe you get headaches, right? All of these are physical signs of tension and stress in our bodies. And we all have them. And really it's your brain's and your body's warning system of saying something is going on here that I need to pay attention to. In this case, it's that my brain is spiraling out of control with all of the negative thinking. So if we can calm our bodies down, often that will signal our brain, okay, this isn't the end of the world. My brain can relax too. And yes, something as simple as taking a few deep breaths is often a great place to start. Because when we start to get stressed, we don't take the healthiest breath. We don't get enough oxygen into our body. If you've ever been there before where you feel like you're kind of short of breath, you're hyperventilating, almost panicking a little bit, right? Makes it really tough for our brains to think. And in general, a little bit of a side note here, but I think helpful for everyone to know is that we don't breathe the best way for our body in most circumstances. And let me explain what I mean. So if you've ever watched a young baby sleeping, they're laying there on their back and they're breathing and their tummies go up and down, right? They take big breaths through their tummies. As we get older, especially women, but men can do this as well, is that we learn a couple of things that change our breathing. So we learn to keep our stomachs in for social body image reasons. We're taught to hold our stomachs tight. And we also learn to talk, which is great. But when we talk, we breathe shallower. We breathe through our chest, and that helps us speak. So we're holding our stomachs in because we're taught to do this socially. We're talking more, so we're breathing more through our chest, which means we're not taking those deep breaths that our body was designed to do, like we do when we're younger, when we're young kids, when we're babies. Our bodies breathe naturally. So what happens as we get older is we stop breathing that way. Then we get stressed and our breathing changes even more. And so we're not getting that restorative breath that can calm that body, calm that mind. And the reason I bring up, how this is also learned is because, like I said, focusing on your breathing is simple, but not necessarily easy, right? Because we spent the past 20, 30, 40 years breathing the way that's not great for our body. So we're having to relearn that again, relearn how to take those deep breaths through our belly that will calm our whole body down, relax our shoulders, relax our body, and then our brain will relax too.
Yeah. So I think that's fascinating, number one. I've never heard that before. And I think that makes so much more sense because when I'm going to choose like a guided meditation on my phone and there's one about breathing, I always like skip by it because I'm like, that just seems boring. Yeah. It just seems too simple. Like I need something that really is going to judge me up or get me somewhere. But I think that is so like fundamental that's why it makes such a big impact, is because it's a core of how we're functioning on a really deep level. So I love that perspective to kind of refocus that as a priority. But then I also really love the idea that of like how much our brains and our body are connected, like that mind-body connection. Because I think another thing that we lose as we get older is just that overall intuition of how to listen to our bodies and how to really be attuned and receptive to the physical symptoms that we're noticing and making the connection to our emotional world. And we just kind of put a boulder between those two. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely.
What do we do about that?
It's not just, we do this individually, but this is also something that we're taught a little bit. And I know things in terms of healthcare are different here in Canada than in the US, but it's a little bit similar in this way, in that mental health and physical health are totally divided in our healthcare system. At least they are here. I'm sure they are in other places too, where, if something is going on with your mind, you go see the mental health team. In the hospital I used to work at, they're like in a totally different wing. They don't even talk to anyone else. If something's wrong with your body, you go see this team over here, right? And that is not actually traditionally how healthcare was set up. So, hundreds of years ago, we viewed our minds and bodies as more connected. And, many of the first psychiatrists, for example, were actually neurologists or physicians who specialized in body health and brain health. And then they branched over into focusing on more of mental and emotional health. But now, we've totally separated things in society. So much so that, our healthcare system is totally split like this. You go to one or the other. And then that's how we ourselves as individuals then view our health. We view our mental and our emotional health as totally separate from our body health, but it's not how it works, right? Our brains control everything in our bodies, and they're so connected in that way.
Oh, yes. You're so right. And like I've been having a lot of neck pain recently. But like I can choose to go to a doctor that's going to look at some things. I could choose to go to a chiropractor, which is going to look at different things. And I can choose to talk to my therapist. And like but none of them are going to be able to see like a really holistic picture of what's going on if it is related to probably stress and, a lot of tension and just like overall things that are affecting my health from like if I look at it as a connected piece, so how do we put the pieces together?
Yeah. So keeping in mind that our minds and our bodies are connected, and anything that impacts our physical health is going to impact our emotional health and vice versa. So, maybe in your example, say maybe you had an injury, you fell and you hurt your back or you hurt your neck. And so, yeah, there's a physical injury there, right? But then what happens is also then you're going to be struggling with that. You're in pain. That's going to impact how you're feeling. You're going to be probably limited in your activities. Maybe you're not doing things the same. And what can happen is we get into this spiral of where our brain says, oh, I'm in a lot of pain. This doesn't feel good. Focuses more on the pain, makes the pain worse, which makes our emotional health worse. And it's really easy to see how those things can get so connected. The example I like to give is even, think about the last time that you had a cold. Even, your body doesn't feel good, but neither does your mind. Right? You're burnt out. You don't have energy. You're not thinking super clearly. Even something as small as a cold or a small minor injury, our brains and our bodies are really connected. So keeping in mind that if I'm struggling with something with my physical health, it's going to impact how I'm feeling. But also if I'm under a lot of stress and pressure right now, my body is going to feel that too. And recognizing that these signs, if it's, like you said, muscle tension or soreness or headaches, like I said, stomach upset is another really common sign. Sometimes these are signs that our brain is under stress and under pressure, and taking a look at, okay, maybe what's going on in my life right now and where can I take some space for myself and give myself that bit of a mental breather to help calm my body and my mind.
And then knowing that that's going to then also lead to physical relief and reprieve from those symptoms as well. Yeah. And just being able to kind of blend those prescriptions, I guess.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Just thinking about your body as a whole person, right? That it's not possible to impact one part of your health and not impact other parts of your health. And like we said, I know the medical system makes us do this because they say like, go to this specialist for this X, Y, and Z, right? But realistically, this is not how our bodies and our minds work. And so giving ourselves some grace and recognizing that we need to heal our whole person.
Yeah, I love that. That's super good perspective to relook at things in a new light. What do you define as overwhelm? Because I heard a description the other day where it was supposed to be like an encouraging message that said, like, usually overwhelm is a result of an abundance of things you already asked for. And I thought that was interesting because when I looked at, my overwhelm with maybe what's on my plate for my business or, with my kids, it's like, it is sometimes too many good things. So where does that come from? How does it interact in our brain when we become overwhelmed?
So usually in terms of kind of our brains, where overwhelm comes from is feeling that things are out of control, right? Whether it's too much good stuff or things that have been, that wrench that gets thrown into the mix, like we all go into quarantine for 9 months and we're trying to adjust and deal with that, right? Is again, taking it back to our brains only have so much capacity to make so many decisions. And if there are a lot of things on our plate, even good things, that takes away some of that decision-making capacity. And one interesting thing is that our brains react to stress the same way if it's a positive stress or a negative stress. So our brains and our bodies react the same way to getting a new job or getting a promotion as they do to losing a job or getting fired, birth of a child, starting a new marriage, or divorce or death of a loved one. The biology of that response is the same. It's how we interpret that response, which is different. And so even when there's lots of positive things going on, things are going great in your business, things are going great at home, if that's maxing out, our brain's capacity for what we can handle, how many decisions we can make, it's still going to feel stressful and overwhelming. Even if it's a positive overwhelm, it's still too much for our minds and bodies.
I that makes sense with that feeling of loss of control, because I know that that's a really big thing in parenting is like we feel out of control of this person and their behaviors. And it's very much a huge trigger to know what things are within our control and what things are not in our control, and accepting that and putting our energy into the right things that we can actually influence. So that makes sense that whether it's positive or negative, that would play into that feeling of overwhelm as well.
Absolutely. And it's not just kids. I know as parents, we feel like we should be able to control this tiny human that came out of us, right? Like, how come you were not listening to me? But so often we think that we can control other things that we really can't as well, right? We feel like we can control how our partners are reacting, or we feel like we can control what this person responds to us or what someone says to us. And really, we can't control those things. All we can control is our own response and our own reaction. And that takes a lot to learn, because we feel like we want to have that control and we want to have control of everything that's going on around us. But, it's not just pandemics that throw that out the window, right? There is so much that we really don't have control over. And when we want to put that control in place, that's just more strain on the brain, right? You're just fighting against this thing that's not going to be controlled in that way, and just leading to that doubt and beating yourself up because you can't do it.
Right. So what is an effective way to rewire that way that we're attaching meaning to that overwhelm? What can we think instead?
Yeah, great question. So one thing I love, and I find this really interesting, my original background, my original research when I was a student a gazillion years ago was on language and the words that we use and how that impacts both the health of our brain, but also how we see the world. And, those watching out for some of those words that we use all the time, which can pull us down, which can make us feel guilty. Should is a great example of one of those words. I should be doing this. I should have done this different. Another one is never or always, as in I always mess up. I'm never going to get this right. I'm never going to be a good mom. I'm always going to be making mistakes like that. Those words, again, that seem simple and they seem small, but have a huge impact on our brain. And again, it comes back to that idea of control. So if I feel like I should be doing this, I'm putting that control outside of myself. There is some external standard, some ideal that I'm saying I should be like, and that's taking control away from me. Same as if I never do this or I'm always going to be that way. Again, it's taking that control outside of ourselves. And so our brain says, now I don't have any control of what's going on. This feels increasingly overwhelming. I can't do this. I feel burnt out. So keeping an eye out for those are three great words to keep an eye out for when you're mentally using them. Catch yourself for a second. Ask yourself, is this really true? Where is this coming from and how is it making me feel? And can I think about this in a different way? So maybe I messed up and put my daughter in her bathtub today with her socks on, but that doesn't mean I'm always going to do this, or that I'm a failure, or that I'm a bad parent. I made a mistake. I messed up. It's kind of funny. She still jokes about it a year later, but it's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean something personally about me. It's a thing that happened, and keeping that in mind of things happen, but that doesn't impact who we are as a person is really at the core of those negative patterns.
Yeah, it's that identity piece.
Yes.
Taking it personally and then making assumptions about our worth or our meaning based off of those things that are truly circumstantial.
Yes. And I get that it doesn't feel like that in the moment, right? And again, our brains are really good at doing this, which is not super helpful, but they're really good at going to that worst case scenario. Oh man, I messed up. That means I'm always going to be a failure. That means I'm wrong. I did something wrong. I'm a bad person. It's like you said, identity about who I am. Well, that's not actually true. It's a thing that happened. And so reframing that, even in the words you use of instead of I'm a failure, I messed up and put my daughter in the tub with her socks on. Okay, I messed up. I made a mistake. I failed even in this instance, but it's a thing that happened. It's not a personal quality about me. I am still a strong person. I'm still a strong woman, and I will learn from this and move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a quick reframe, but a really powerful one that we probably need to do several times a day, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah.
And what do you feel like plays into our patience level? Because that's kind of a rabbit hole that I've dove a lot into when I work with families, because I feel like it's very multifaceted. And I think we tend to almost dumb it down too much to say, well, I should just be more patient. And I think there's so many factors working against us in that moment, and so many different things that need attention. And so how do you see that, and maybe even see that playing out, in your own patience level?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, it helps to keep in mind that mind-body connection and the idea of limited resources. So we're going to be less patient when our resources are drained, right? When it's the 10th time that your kid has called you to come tuck them back in again, that's 10 times yes, right? And yeah, that's like our brains are getting drained. It's the end of the day. They called 10 times already for us. You're hitting that decision fatigue. Your brain says, no, I cannot do this anymore. And your patience is short. You don't have those mental resources to respond the way that you'd really like to be able to give yourself that compassion. And sometimes that happens, right? And recognizing, okay, I'm just at the limit of my resources right now. Is there any way I can take a little bit of a break for myself? Can I, walk away for 5 minutes? Can I take some of those deep breaths? Can I put this off for another day? And, coming back to, again, that idea of, as moms, especially, we feel like we need to be doing so much and do all these things all the time. But, sometimes that thing can wait till later. And sometimes it's not the end of the world if this cleaning task gets put off for a couple of days. For example, if you're feeling burnt out and at the end of your patience, that's your body and your mind telling you, right, I'm done right now and I need a little bit of time and something taken off my load.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree, because bedtime last night, I had to walk away. But there's still that pressure, I think, to say like, but if I just get this done, if I can just get her to sleep, then I can really clock out. And that's battling with the part of my brain that's saying like, red flag, you need to walk away. This isn't going well. And I usually stay in there too long until I regret something that I've said or done. And then I finally walk away and circle back. But I think that it's such a mind game, and it's such a mindset and, health thing. And it's like, but also we're feeling not confident in how we're even handling it in the first place, of how do I get them to sleep? And then we're struggling with feeling out of control. And there's just so many things. Yes. Plus feeling depleted by the end of the day. That's what bedtime. Oh man.
Yes.
I've genuinely, I can feel like a pretty good mom most of the day until bedtime comes, and then I'm humbled and put back in my place.
Yeah. No, I hear that. Yeah.
But that makes sense.
Yes. My toddler's an expert at bedtime delays right now too, and asking for just a little bit more. And I know something that you mentioned as well is that an extra component that makes it tough is, you're trying to get your kid down to sleep, and you're also thinking about the stuff that you need to get done still, right? And so your brain is really being pulled in two separate directions. And that's going to add to that impatience. If I am at the back of my mind thinking like, oh my God, I need to do this as fast as possible because I need to get onto these other things, less resources to actually focusing on getting our child down. And kids are pretty perceptive, right? They're like kind of like puppies in that way. When you're anxious around a puppy, like they get anxious and stressed too, right? Kids do their little empaths. They absorb what we're giving off all the time. So if, mom and dad are getting frustrated, they're going to get frustrated too. And they don't have the skills yet often to regulate their own emotions. And so we really need to do that for them by controlling ourselves. And as much as possible, I know it's tough, but saying, we're doing bedtime now. This is all I'm thinking about until bedtime is done. Like, this other stuff that has to get done, I'm just going to stick it in a mental box right now, put it on the shelf until I'm done with bedtime, so it's not taking away my resources and I can focus my energy on this. Then I move on to the next thing. And that's something I know that burns a lot of our mental resources as well throughout the day, is that trying to multitask in that way of trying to jump back and forth between things. And our brains actually can't do that. We can't multitask. So all we do is we switch back and forth between things really fast, and that really drains our energy. And even if it's a mental multitask, if I'm thinking about these things I need to get done for work, but I'm focusing on my child right now, really draining resources, really going to bring that impatience out. That frustration is going to come up even faster.
Yeah. That's so good to remember in all of those situations of just trying to preserve what battery we have left for the day, essentially. We really do give ourselves too much credit for what we think we can handle while multitasking, and it comes back to bite us.
Yeah. And then we're frustrated that it's not working, right?
Yeah. I should be able to do this. Why am I not?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's so many tasks in motherhood that are mundane or monotonous or, not stimulating because we're just like cutting up a banana that we start jumping around to try to keep ourselves occupied, but it does take us away from the present and makes sense that it would then create that irritability because I've seen that play out when I'm definitely I'm trying to get something done, like finish an email or write a post, and then I'm also pulled in another direction. It's just my patience is way less than if I was one task focused in that moment, for sure.
That's right. Especially with, modern world and technology, and you can be doing that, right? Like your phone's going off, it's flashing alerts at you and you're trying to cut up that banana, but your kids are talking to you and the TV's on, and all of these things are pulling our energy and our focus away.
Yeah. I, for one, cannot handle when my husband's talking to me and there's TV or music on, and then my kids are trying to talk to me.
Yes. Yeah.
I cannot handle. I can't deal. And like at first, it wasn't even something I knew about my personality, and now I'm just like, I can recognize it the second it starts happening. I'm like, nope, this is not working.
Yeah,
turning the music down. You need to wait. How can we focus? Okay, focused.
Yes, that's great. Yeah.
So I'm done beating myself up for that one, because that is just straight up how I function, and there's no way around it. Yeah. So I may as well just start finding ways to set myself up for success a little more.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And really, that's how 99% of us function. I know people will say they can multitask and then they can, no, they can't. Maybe they're really efficient at it, but they would be more efficient if they weren't doing it. I promise you, that's how your brain works.
Yes. Yes, true. Okay. So if I could give you a platform or soapbox to say, like, what do you feel like moms need to hear most based on, like your knowledge and your experience? What do you want them to hear as a takeaway from this episode?
Yeah. What I want people to know is that you can't save the world if you're burnt out. And moms especially, if you are burnt out and you're running low on resources, as much as you want to help everyone else, we can't do it. And so recognizing where those resources are going, making sure you're saving some for yourself so you're not getting to that point at the end of the day where you're irritable and burnt out and just want to flop on the couch and pray for tomorrow.
Oh, that's so good. If we can all remember that, then it makes sense to prioritize getting ourselves right in the morning and finding ways to extend that battery throughout the day so that we have a better chance at being the person we want to be for our kids throughout that day, and not thinking that it's something wrong about us, that we just can't do it. For sure. Oh, that's so good. So how can listeners connect with you? Tell us more about what you're up to these days and your podcast and all that.
Yeah. So I have a podcast as well. It's called The Bold Life Podcast, really focused on working moms and sharing strategies to help, just like we talked about today, manage that burnout, manage that overwhelm, manage that guilt and that tendency to be hard on ourselves so we can really improve our health and our efficiency and get more done in the day while also feeling happier.
Love that.
So you can check out my podcast. Absolutely. If folks are interested, kind of on the lines of the topic we've discussed today, I have a free quiz on my website. It's drnicolebyers.com/quiz. It's called What's Your Stress Personality? And so we all have a unique way that we approach problems, that we cope with and handle stress, and understanding how we approach stress and pressure can really help in those situations where you're feeling overwhelmed. So if I know that these strategies are going to work the best based on my personality, that can be my go-to strategy to make us more efficient, to make us feel more in control. So if you fill out that quiz, it's really short. It's pretty fun. I think it's fun. At least you'll get your personalized stress style and some of those tips and specific strategies based on your unique style.
That's so cool. I love that. So I'll link that in the show notes as well as your website and your podcast so that listeners can go jump on that when they're done listening.
Great.
But I love to wrap up every episode with the same question. So I'll ask you, how are you the mom that your daughter needs?
That's a great question. I am the mom that my daughter needs because I am working every day to show her and be that model for just what she could accomplish and how it's important to build that confidence in yourself so that you can reach those goals, whether it's in your personal life or your professional life.
I love that. She's so lucky to have you.
Thanks. I'll remind her that when she tells me about the next time I put her in the tub with her socks.
Right. Add that to your resume.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for your time and all that advice. It's so valuable and so needed. We could play this for ourselves every week, I'm sure, and keep reminding ourselves of things that we've already forgotten. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing with us today.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
Absolutely. Okay, you made it. What'd you think? I want to know what the takeaway was for you. What did you need to hear? DM me on Instagram at parent_wholeheartedly and share it with me, and I would love to hear from you. So, if you are loving this show, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts if you haven't already. And always remember the worth of the work that you're doing. It is worth it. Now, also, if you haven't yet, register for my masterclass. Don't miss out. Thanks for coming on this journey with me, friend. I believe in you, and I'm cheering you on.